Parecia um dia perfeito, de sol, sem nuvens. Uma manhã que convidava os nova-iorquinos a um passeio pelas ruas de Nova Iorque, sem saberem que as suas vidas estavam prestes a mudar. Para sempre.
And it was such a beautiful day. I took my time on my walk. And there was a film crew in the street. We heard the first plane hit. We didn't see it, so we didn't know what it was. We were just a couple blocks away. And as close as we were, we couldn't tell what it was. And we were curious, so like typical New Yorkers, we looked up, we stayed in the street.
I worked about 2 blocks from the Trade Center, and I was going to work, and I got upstairs, got my coffee, went upstairs, and everything broke loose. People were yelling and screaming that a plane had hit the Trade Center. I changed my shoes. I was wearing really high heels, and I changed it to something a little bit lower. Thank God I had that in the office. And I said, oh, come on, let's go downstairs. I'm sure it's fine. We walked downstairs, and with my intention of showing people that everything was okay. And it wasn't. There were body parts already on the street that we were passing by, pieces of human beings.
I was in my office, the first tower got hit. The commissioner, who I used to work for, called me and said, listen, a plane hit the tower, and I'm monitoring the radios, and the police and fire vehicles are coming from all over the city responding down to the World Trade Center. Can you get all the staff out of the building and assist PD in making sure everybody that's running up, because the first tower was hit, stays out of the street and doesn't get hit by a car. So I did that.
I was following up on a burglary, and when the first plane hit, I realized I'm going to shut down. We had the Williamsburg Bridge that ends in the 90 and starts in Manhattan. So I went to the Manhattan side at Delancey and Clinton and shut down the Manhattan side. Anti-crime sergeant Richie Payton, Ricardo Payton, he shut down the Brooklyn side. And we originally shut the bridge down because we thought it was an accident, the first plane crash. And we figured emergency vehicles need to come in or come out, go to different hospitals.
It was a beautiful sunny morning. I took my oldest son to the bus. My husband was home with the little ones. I had to go to CVS to get Tylenol because the baby wasn't feeling good. And when I got back in my car, I heard on the radio that one of the towers was hit by an airplane. When I went home, my husband was playing Buzz Lightyear video game with my middle son. I went downstairs and told him what I had heard on the news, and he immediately said it has to be a radio gag. There's no way a plane would fly into one of the towers. He came upstairs to turn on the news, discovered that it was not a gag, unfortunately, and he proceeded to get himself ready to leave. He packed all of his belongings. He said goodbye to myself and my sons, and immediately went to his firehouse, got his gear, and went to the towers.
Tinha saído de trabalhar de noite, fui para casa para descansar e rapaz que trabalhava comigo chamou-me e disse: Arthur, tu já viste há um grande fogo em Nova Iorque? Eu disse: não, assim, mal coisa, e quê? Olha para a televisão e tu vês? E então, e acendi a televisão e estava a dar, a todos os canais, estava a dar o prédio de das gêmeas em fogo. Eu disse: ai, que acidente que aconteceu.
Nesse momento, as televisões de todo o mundo transmitiam em direto o incêndio que deflagrava na torre norte do World Trade Center. Havia relatos de que uma avioneta tinha embatido no edifício, mas na verdade ninguém sabia muito bem o que tinha acontecido.
Just on the street, trying to figure out, like everyone else on the street, what was that, what had happened, and we saw people at the windows and then people up on the roof.
and we watched the fire from the first plane. And as we were standing there watching to see what was happening, I don't know that any of us were really thinking straight at that point. The second plane went over our heads.
He was flying really low. He was very close to the city, really unusual to see. And then he hit the tower.
We think this is a terrorist attack, meaning we thought it was a bomb. We didn't know it was an airplane. So with that now, just think, both towers are on fire. I have more people now running out, because they told the second tower, stay put while we try to evacuate the first tower. Now both towers, people are panicking and leaving both buildings. So the amount of people that were running up the streets was just crazy.
And then the police started yelling at everyone to clear the streets and get off the streets. I went back up to my office, made sure that everybody was cleared out. And then we went to a restaurant that was just about across the street from us. It was called Moran's, because we didn't know where else to go. At that point, we didn't know what was going on.
We didn't try to get closer because at that point you could see that, whether glass was blowing out from the heat or people were breaking it because people were throwing things through the windows to get air because the windows didn't open. So then, we stayed back. You didn't want to get close because we didn't know what was coming out of the building. You just didn't know. It was very eerie. There were crows, hundreds of birds, and the birds were catching fire. So it was really apocalyptic, just to this day, I still stand by, it was shock that kept me in that street that I didn't move.
Meanwhile, we're watching the towers on fire, and people actually had to make a decision if they were going to burn up or they just jumped to their death. And my staff and I witnessed individuals jumping out of the windows.
A América estava a ser atacada. As Torres Gêmeas, um dos maiores símbolos de Nova Iorque e dos Estados Unidos, ardiam em direto nas televisões de todo o mundo. As perguntas continuavam a ser mais do que as respostas, mas um pouco por toda a região, bombeiros, polícias e voluntários começavam a preparar-se para se dirigir para a zona e ajudar todos aqueles que precisassem.
Right away, I knew something's not right. Two planes, it's not an accident. And you saw it coming in. I said, oh my God, what's going on? So I turned around to go back home because I knew there was something going on. And you heard on the radio we're being attacked and so on and so forth. And on the way home, I kept staring at the Trade Center, driving very fast and rushing back to go to the firehouse.
My mom called me at the time. Typical mom, she said, please tell me you're not there. And I said, well, Mom, yeah, I'm right here. And she said to me, well, you've got to get out. How are you going to get out? And I said to her, I don't know. I'm going to try. And then the phone cut off. And that was the last time I spoke to my family for probably 8 hours. Years later.
Mas o que já parecia um pesadelo estava prestes a piorar. Da capital, Washington, D.C., surgiam notícias de que um terceiro avião tinha batido contra o Pentágono. O governo entrava em estado de alerta. E então, o impensável aconteceu.
The commissioner called me on the radio and said, listen, wrap it up down there and get everybody back in the building because they're talking on the radio of possible buildings collapsing. I went directly to the commissioner's office, who I used to work for when he was the 4-star chief, and we were monitoring the radios in his office, and we were listening to them saying, get everybody out of the buildings, mayday, 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 get out of the buildings are going to collapse. And you have to understand something, the radios from the police department and the fire department and the different emergency departments that were down there, FBI and all of them, they're not on the same radio frequency. So when the fire department or whoever was calling to get out of the building, the other individuals didn't hear that.
You know, I would walk back and forth to the front of the restaurant to see what was going on because we had a clear view of the trade centers down the street. And at some point, 2 men came running in screaming to take cover. And we all went under tables, I remember, and piled each other under tables. And I just remember people praying. And then I blanked out. I blacked out for I don't know how long.
It felt like an earthquake under our feet. And I've certainly felt an earthquake before. It was a sound like a freight train, just a rumble. And I've said before, in '93 when World Trade was bombed, you know, the newscasters said that if the towers had fallen, there would be debris as far as 42nd Street. And so here I was under this tower coming down and thinking, I'm just a couple blocks. What is going to happen here? The rumble from that building was intense. It was just a, and it just fell in. And that was the thing that saved so many of us, because had the towers fallen as they projected, so many more would have lost their lives. I'm still not sure how we weren't hit with debris.
Minutos depois chegavam as notícias de que um quarto avião tinha caído na Pensilvânia, e foi apenas uma questão de tempo até a segunda torre desabar.
We're up in the commissioner's office, and you could see from his window, you could see the towers on fire. And we're monitoring the radios, and then subsequently the first tower collapsed, and then the second tower collapsed, and everything, communication, silence, nothing.
And at some point, people told us it was time to get up, and they let us outside the restaurant. And it was, you know, very much what you see on TV, some of that footage where it's like right after snowfall. It's very quiet, lots of papers flying around, debris very thick on the floor, and you could hear the pass alarms, the alarms from the firefighters' oxygen tanks.
And you couldn't see anything. I think many people have had dreams where you're running in your dream, but you can't run. There's something that you can't see that's frightening, and then there's something that's keeping you from running. And it was very much like that. It was very much like a nightmare come to life that you couldn't see in front of you. We certainly didn't know what was happening outside of where we were.
Manhattan looked like it was nighttime. It was a beautiful sunny day that day, blue skies. After the second tower collapsed, the area down there around us all looked like it was 8 o'clock at night. And we're sitting there. It felt like a long time, but it was probably a couple minutes in silence, not knowing what just happened. You had 210-story buildings implode, and we were now under a terrorist attack.
I had 2 kids at home. One was in school, one was home. You know, are they going to be okay? You know, we didn't know what was going on. Yeah. And then we heard another plane in the Pentagon. Another plane was taken down in Pennsylvania, Shanksville. So it was very, very nerve-wracking, and seeing fighter jets all over the air. They were up in the sky, back and forth, going everywhere. You saw a lot of planes, you know, I guess they were being diverted. So you saw that, and it just got quiet. The rest of the day was just eerie. You know, nobody knew what was going on.
It had cleared by then. It had cleared by then, so we could see where we were going. We walked sort of down. I remember passing a fire truck, and there was a fireman in front. And I said to him, you know, did 234 come in? Did 234 come in? That's where my husband was. And, you know, he didn't know. And I realized, obviously, you know, well after the fact that he had probably lost his whole company. You know, he was the only one who probably made it through. And I don't even remember what company he was with. But we continued to make our way down. I kept trying to get a call out, you know, to John or my parents, and we couldn't. Finally made our way to the Brooklyn Bridge, like so many people did.
On the Williamsburg Bridge, and it happened on the Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge also, is just a mass of people crossing that bridge, just a mass exodus. And now that haunts me, to see the people crossing the bridge that day. They were like zombies, just to get out off the island. And the look in their faces, some covered in dust, a lot of people with no shoes. And so I spent till about 11 o'clock at night on the bridge. And then that was my first day on 9/11.
And the people saw us all full of dust and grime, and I had cement in my hair, and offered us, you know, what do you need? What do you need? And, you know, I said, I need a bottle of water and a phone. And I called the firehouse first, and they had said that he had gone in. I found out later they thought that I was dead, because they knew where I was. They thought I was dead, and they had given John instructions to go find me, to go find my body.
There was a ferry on 39th Street, so I walked 4 miles, covered in dust and smoke. And when it got to the ferry, there was a gentleman who was trying to keep order and get people on board, and he handed me a towel, and I said to him, what is this for? And he said, for your feet. And when I looked down, I'd had on a long skirt and heels, and the skirt was completely ripped, shredded, up to my knees. My feet were bloody. I'd stepped on glass. I didn't even feel it. I literally didn't feel the glass in my feet. Not until he told me to look down did I realize that I had glass in my feet. And that's the kind of emotional place that I was in, that I couldn't even feel that.
Eu trabalhava como paramédica, portanto os telefones não paravam, nós sempre a andar a correr de um lado para o outro, e entretanto mandaram-nos para o Penn Station em Newark, porque eles estavam a evacuar a cidade, e então queriam mandar toda a gente para lá, e nós estávamos a receber pessoas que vieram daqui. Eles estavam a pôr toda a gente em comboios para mandá-los para onde fosse, e as pessoas estavam a vir cobertas do pó daqui, e então nós tínhamos uma área de contaminação.
Enquanto os civis tentavam escapar da cidade, um pequeno grupo de responsáveis começava a tomar as primeiras medidas para socorrer os feridos e encontrar os mortos.
And that was William Fraser. He was our commissioner at the time. And he said, what are we going to do? I said, I have no idea. He said, we need to make sure everything's okay on Rikers, and then we need to go down there. So we went down outside. This is probably a half hour, 45 minutes after the towers collapsed. And we went down to ground zero. We went down there expecting to find, you know, people running, people coming out of the buildings and stuff, but everything was pulverized and there was nothing. So with that, the commissioner said, what do we have on Rikers that we can bring down here? Because there's nothing down here. Everything was gone. So we have 2 storehouses on Rikers Island that are the size of football fields, these tents. They're our storehouses. And we brought down the first 800 body bags down to ground zero.
I had the TV, the news on all day. I tried to keep my younger sons in their playroom separate from the TV. But one of the things that I'll never forget, my children knew I was upset. They knew his dad went there. But my middle son, Kevin, came into the room and he saw on the news that one firefighter that they showed an image of covered in dust and debris. And he said, "Don't worry, Mommy, only one firefighter got hurt." You know, in the mind of a less than 3-year-old, that was his perception.
Buscar a Long Island City e levou-me para Manhattan.
Logo nesse dia?
Logo nesse dia, eu estava cá embaixo, eram umas 2h30. Levámos para começarmos a coordenar as infraestruturas de desenvolver um projeto primeiro para ajudar as forças de segurança, policiais e os bombeiros a ver se conseguiam salvar ainda pessoas. O primeiro dia foi um dia que bombeiros, polícia, times de resgate que vieram de outras províncias de Nova Iorque ou até dos Estados Unidos, e todos se concentrou ali para que todos pudessem fazer logo o melhor que podiam para ver se conseguiam salvar pessoas. Foi o primeiro dia, não havia tempo para pensar em outra coisa, como se uma invasão de pessoas. Todos os bombeiros nessa altura estavam a tomar conta da situação e foi uma situação de salvamento.
I had about 200 and something people on the job. I gave them all the option of staying there and getting a hotel room or going home, and everybody frantically left. I had to lock up, close up the job. I drove to the office, and immediately we were packing gear and machinery and the tools necessary, and later that night, early into the morning, we had a 4-car police escort into Ground Zero, and I worked there for 5.5 days. I've been able to block it out over the last 20 years by choice. I went to therapy for 2.5 years to block out what I saw. Every day I have that self-mechanism, that wall up to stop that from entering my thought process. But what I can't block out is the smell. And the smell will always lurk around me and prevents me from a lot of good nights of sleep. But what I did see, no human being's programmed to wake up in the morning and see that kind of devastation and destruction and carnage.
Entretanto, familiares de polícias e bombeiros que se tinham dirigido às Torres Gêmeas começaram a entrar em pânico. A ausência de notícias podia significar o pior. Foi o caso de Virgínia Ferreira, que desde aquela manhã não sabia do namorado, polícia da autoridade portuária.
Não conseguia confirmar o local dele, mas eu sentia dentro de mim que havia alguma coisa ali que não estava bem. Eu dirigi-me à estação de polícia à meia-noite para saber então o que é que se está a passar. Vocês não nos estão a dizer nada, não sabemos onde é que está o David, não conseguimos confirmar se ele está bem, o que é que se está a passar. E então foi aí quando eles confirmaram que ele era um dos 37 que não sabiam onde estava. E pronto, foi assim. Desculpe. Foi assim o começo de um pesadelo.
And then eventually he came home that night, late that night, probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, he came home. Yeah, he talked to me about what he found and who he found, and There was never really a who, it was more a what, mostly parts of people to the extent that there was. Usually it was a helmet. Once he said he was digging and he actually touched, there was a person, a part of a person. Unfortunately, it wasn't a whole person. And he would talk about, they would find keys and they would find other small objects, identification cards, things like that. But they never found, I remember he was always amazed. There were no desks, no computers, nothing big. Everything that they found was very small. And I remember he was just so surprised at how everything got absolutely pulverized.
No dia seguinte, o bombeiro português Artur Sanhudo foi um dos muitos que se ofereceram para participar nas operações de resgate.
Então, cheguei lá a um certo sítio, fui falar com os camaradas de Nova Iorque e disse: o que é que vocês querem que eu faça? Que nós fazemos. E eles então disseram-nos: vai buscar estes baldes, e começam a resgatar as coisas, a encher os baldes de lixo, de terra, de tudo, que a ver se a gente encontra alguém. E então fizemos isso por 8 horas, saímos outra vez, fomos para casa, que eu tive que trabalhar outra vez, e vim outra vez da outra manhã, a segunda dia que fui para lá, fazer a mesma coisa. Não se encontrou ninguém. O que é que a gente viu lá? Foi as partes dos humanos, braços, coisas assim, que isso ainda está cá dentro, que isso não quero que ninguém veja isso.
Just total devastation, smoke, the air burnt your lungs, your eyes, and you just started digging. We thought we were going to be rescuing people, but there was no one to rescue.
From the rubble?
Yeah, the rubble, yeah. And you really couldn't, a lot of stuff you couldn't lift.
I don't know how far down we were, but it was way down. I was with a fireman from Ladder 163, Duncan Cook. I was with him, and unfortunately, I found soiled garment it appeared to be female clothing. And it hurt. It hurt because it just hurt to actually touch it and pull it out and what is it, And there was a couple of scary moments when we were underneath and the pile shifted, the horns going off, like the soccer horns that I can't hear them to this day. Because all you did was hear those horns, and that meant something was coming down, something dangerous that was happening.
But my job was body recovery and identification, which means that I worked with NYPD K9. I was assigned one police officer and his dog. The officer's was Eric, and the dog was named Bandit. So fire department would cut the rebarbs in ground zero, in the pit, and then we would go in, and if the dog sat down, we knew that there was something there. And then we would excavate it and bring it, and then whether it was uniform member or civilians, then if it was a uniform member, we would shut down the whole in the operation, and we waited for the family to come down, and then we would do the honor procession to the ambulance.
Apesar dos cuidados, as equipas de resgate sofreram vários acidentes. Yvonne Sanchez caiu num poço e ficou empalada numa viga de ferro que lhe atravessou as costas. Já o trabalhador de construção civil John Phil foi outra das vítimas.
Well, on September 17th, with about a half an hour left in my shift, because they went to 12-hour shifts on the 15th, roughly 8,000 pounds of steel crushed my left foot. The blood was shooting out of my boot about 6-7 feet in the air, different directions. I don't know if you ever noticed, if blood was shooting out of your body, that it's kind of, is that me? And the guy next to me got a little woozy. He's like, John, are you okay? I said, are you okay? And I said, give me your belt. I made a tourniquet below my knee. I hobbled over to the curb to safety, and I got my boot off, but I couldn't get my sock off because the bones were sticking to it. And the fire department was there within 3 minutes. They put a towel in front of me so I couldn't see my foot. And then I was yelling at everybody, get back to work, I'll be back in a couple hours. No, you know, I spent 9 days in Bellevue Hospital, and they said you have gangrene, you might die. I said, what? And I thought gangrene was like from the 1800s in a gunshot, you know, in the movies. And I didn't really understand. And then they're like, well, you're septic, your organs are being affected. And then I just told my mother to get me out of this hospital, and they transported me by ambulance to a hospital on Long Island, where I spent 10 weeks, you know, fighting for my life.
Mas se os atentados mataram quase 3.000 pessoas naquele dia, ao longo dos últimos 20 anos foram fazendo muitas mais vítimas.
You still smell it. I'm medicated now to calm down because I have severe PTSD and anxiety over it. It was something you never smelled before. It was something you didn't, it was just different. And from being there, I guess the emotions, your senses took everything in and filed it in your brain, and it came back to haunt us. It was, I can't even say chemical. It was just different smells that were just different. Just different. It was very heavy. I had noticed getting sick and coughing within the 2 weeks.
And I went to work like that every day thereafter, trying to help my company, trying to figure out what to do. Every day I walked through that dust, and almost immediately I wasn't breathing right. I had breathed in so much dust and ash that it was literally coughing it up. I would cough up ash. When you would sweat, it would come out in your skin. You'd wipe your skin and you'd have ash. And psychologically, that was just terrible. By the time it got to be 2 years after September 11th, I was using equipment to breathe. I couldn't breathe. I just couldn't get a full breath of air. My daughter says, she was 5 at the time, that I sounded like Darth Vader. And you could hear me breathe 15 feet away. It sounded like a death rattle. It was very scary. And I didn't know what to do. The doctors didn't know how to treat us. They'd never seen chemical exposure like that before.
Rather quickly, he developed a cough that became constant. And then he started getting bronchitis several times a year. Then he started developing, in addition to the bronchitis, pneumonia. And in 2005, his lung function just started going down every year. He was determined to stay a firefighter, though. For the most part, he tried to hide it from the firehouse and from his medicals so that he could stay an active firefighter. He was a very healthy, fit man. So I did feel it was from there. But when things started getting very bad, he did hide it even from me. After he passed away and I went to clear out his boot locker at work, I found his failed pulmonary function test from the fire department. I found all of the medicals that he didn't want at home.
2005, I noticed that I was having trouble breathing. My sinuses, always had sinus infection. My stomach, I had 8 ulcers. They believe was from the smell, everything that was down there. So they thought I had stomach cancer because I had 8 bleeding ulcers. And then my sinuses, and then my lungs, and then the cancer, and now I'm here.
A luta passou então a ser outra, pelo direito aos cuidados de saúde e indemnizações para todos aqueles que ficaram afetados pelo 11 de setembro. John Phil tem sido dos principais rostos dessa luta.
You know, when I started walking the halls of Congress 17 years ago, and they said we weren't sick, we were making it up, science caught up to us and gave us validity. because, you know, they try to demonize us. They try to downplay the significance. We ate there, we slept there, we cried there, we went to the bathroom there, we worked on the pile there. There are those who went to school there, lived in Lower Manhattan, worked in Lower Manhattan. The absorption through the nose, mouth, and skin of these toxins. Individually, if you just took all of those tens of thousands of toxins that were in the air and put one in a bottle, you'd have skull with crossbones saying harmful if swallowed, consult a physician.
Our government didn't want to admit that we've been exposed. It was liability. Who's liable for these people? Is it the city? Is it the state? Is it the federal government? Nobody wants to have to pay.
Like most 9/11 responders, I have scarring of the lungs. Besides my physical injury that led to 40 surgeries, I was diagnosed by 4 doctors with post-traumatic. And my slight breathing issue, a lot of 9/11 responders, they got sick, many passed away. Many of them got sick and just gave up, and they let themselves deteriorate physically and mentally. I refuse.
You know, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's 20 years, we can go on with our lives. Well, you know what? I have a child who doesn't remember his father because he was 2 years old when he died. So, no, there's not getting on with your life. There's figuring out what the new normal is. There's figuring out how to keep that person alive so that at least he feels like he knew his dad, even though he doesn't remember him, you know. But I think that people forget that the effects for those of us in this community last forever.
It's a day that doesn't end for so many people. And I think it's important for everybody to remember that there are still so many people suffering from illnesses and passing away because of that day.
Há 20 anos, os ataques terroristas do 11 de setembro começaram por chocar o mundo, mas os eventos que os atentados desencadearam acabaram por mudar os destinos do planeta, com efeitos que ainda hoje se fazem sentir. Nuno Tiago Pinto e Alexandre Azevedo, a sábado, em Nova Iorque.